Mhm.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's Dustin here in the Midwest. I am joined by Misty Paterson in probably one of the most beautiful areas in the world, Vancouver, BC. She's north of the border. So Misty is an educator. She's also an author of Pop-Up Studio. And so Misty, how are you doing today?
I am great, Dustin. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so
Awesome.
excited to dialogue with you about things we're both passionate about.
Fantastic, fantastic. And that, education is something we are both passionate about. So tell about your background in art and education in general.
Yeah. So I come from a family of educators. Like I'm literally surrounded in every aspect. Even my parents are divorced, and my stepmom's actually a teacher too. So I feel like it is kind of inescapable. In the early stages of my thinking of career, I was like, I'm for sure not going to be a teacher. But I actually did a lot of traveling, and I was able to teach in China and in Australia and a few other places. And I was really drawn to the work. And so I quickly returned home, finished my degrees. Well, I had my degree in Australia, I guess, but and just kind of fast tracked my way through and found a lot of resonance in the program. I have a 5-year Bachelor of Education degree from the University of Victoria. And I think that, was a really good program. And I have a Master of Arts in Curriculum and Pedagogy. So clearly I had a thirst for continuing the work. The art piece is really interesting because I don't have a fine arts background. And while I always was attracted to the arts, I really fell into this false binary or dichotomy of artist versus non-artist. And I definitely felt like I was a non-artist. I was not this talented person who could paint a masterpiece or dance this beautiful performance or do spoken word or, whatever the medium and modalities were that I was appreciating. I felt like that was reserved for creative people. But at the same time, I felt like I had this sort of hidden talent, and I also really identified with a high level of sensitivity. So when I came across art defined differently than how I envisioned art, it was really exciting. And one of the definitions I like comes from Seth Godin from The Practice. And I just bookmarked it here to share and quote him directly. But he says, in chapter 9 or point 9, this is art, not painting, but art. The act of doing something that might not work simply because it's a generous thing to do. The combination of talent, skill, craft, and point of view that brings new light to old problems. The way we change our culture and ourselves. And I really like that because I definitely am a change maker, and I inspire children to be the same. So in that way, I really can step into my artistry, and I hope that I can help others to do the same.
Absolutely. I love it. And, like you, I grew up in a family of educators. My mom was a teacher, for 31 years at the elementary level. So I know those days of going to her classroom in August and, helping her as much as I as much as I wanted to help her get her room ready and her grading papers and all that good stuff. So I know how it goes. And, when you speak about art, I'll be the first one to tell people I am not an artist whatsoever. I have trouble just tracing my own hand, but there's a beauty with it. And there's just so many disciplines within it. And it's really what you create. And you're really bringing out that creativity in you. And so, I like to think of myself as a creative person, and you can do that in so many ways with art. So the way you spoke of it is just very eloquent, and just really cool to see. So when students are working on art, whether it is an art class or they're just doodling in class, what skills are they building when they're utilizing art?
Mm-hmm. So, and again, I want to make it really clear, like I'm not like an art teacher in the
Mhm.
sense that, I don't teach kids how to draw or paint or things like that. And not to say that I haven't done some of that work, but I would say I probably haven't done it well. The kind of art that I'm thinking about is really using studio thinking. And so I wanted to highlight the work of different researchers at Project Zero, and this is one of the books that I really like in terms of articulating what studio thinking might look like, sound like, and feel like. And so I wanted to draw a little bit on their work to identify what I think is at play in terms of teaching art. You mentioned skills. One of the words that I really like thinking about is competency or even disposition. And to me, that word broadens out and braids skill and attitude and inclination, and also the sensitivity to opportunity. So to me, that is a little bit more sort of holistic. So when I think about things that children or any learners are working on developing and actualizing in the art classroom, or anytime they're doing creative work that might not work, as we talked about, I think they're doing a few things. So one is technique. They're building technique. And how might we think about that? I think it's the idea of properly using tools and materials, but not always in a conventional kind of way. I think it's a really informed way that really thinks about artistic choices. And I think it's also about using the technique to push the boundaries and do something that's outside of convention, if that makes sense. I think that they're also working on engagement and persistence or commitment. And in that, I think that they're really like tuning into and honing their passion and their purpose, and they're exercising that, which I think is really exciting and very needed in our world today. They're also working, and Destiny, you and I were talking about this prior to kind of the formal start of the interview, but the importance of vision and envisioning. You know, thinking in images is really important. And we know that even from the sports world, the power of vision and having that visualization is really, really powerful. And I think it's not just envisioning, you know, what I want to do, but I think it's visioning really generative possibilities. And that, again, is, we can see, is just so important in the world today. Two others that I wanted to highlight: finding meaning comes through in the arts when you're grasping the visual and the non-visual and the metaphorical qualities of something. And thinking metaphorically is also really important. When I think about, you know, even from the business side of things, being able to say what something is like zings with the client, it speaks to our emotional qualities and, you know, helps us resonate. And that's just a really important skill. And the last one I wanted to talk about is risk-taking, taking a leap by stretching and exploring. And that's part of the conditional thinking that's important, I think, as well. The what if we did this or we did that, or what if it was like this, or and I think that's really good for problem solving, but also problem finding, which we know is key in the design thinking cycle. And so for all of these reasons and more, I just feel like artistic ways of being in the world, of thinking, of making sense of things and representing, is something we've always done, we've always needed, and we continue to need.
Absolutely. You know, I see this almost every day in my classes. You know, I have a student bring a piece that they're working on, and it could be a pretty detailed drawing, and they're stumped. Okay, how do I get from point A to D? Okay, well, you got to get to B and C first. Okay, well, how do you do that? So, you know, they're having that battle with themselves. Okay, how do I problem solve this? You know, I just know when students become adults, they're not always going to have that person to help them. You know, they're going to have to do some stuff on their own. And you talk about taking that leap, you know, I almost think that like jumping off the high dive, you know, you know, some kids, they learn to swim very easily. Some, it takes a long time, and you never know what you're capable of doing until you give it a shot. And so art is just one of those things. So when we talk about art in the classroom setting, how can it transcend the classroom? We look
Mhm.
at stuff, you know, getting our kids out moving and thinking and really interacting with the world. How can art bring that to life? How can it transcend the classroom?
Mhm. So I think if we think about, you know, what we just were talking about in terms of the skills, or I was kind of braiding it, the skills with attitudes and inclination and sensitivity into a disposition. Um, we can think of it as very performative. That it's rather than sort of product based. I think again, we get into this, what is art, or thinking about the final masterpiece that's hanging in an art gallery. And I don't feel like that's helpful for many reasons. So if we can think of it as a performance, and we think of it as a process, we think of it as a way of being in the world, then we can start to think about some of those things I just mentioned and where they have value beyond the classroom period. So we think about risk taking beyond the classroom, right? We can probably think of a million reasons, or, making a vision for something, having a vision. Even cleaning their room, right, requires a bit of a vision. What does it look like with the end in mind? Which is part of, Sarah Ward and others' work talking about executive functioning and how important that is. So I really feel like there's a great synergy between studio thinking, art making, art types of being, and executive functioning, pro-social behavior, right? All of these things that we know are just so important. So to give, a couple of examples, I think, again, there's synergy between this work and project-based learning or service-based learning as examples. So when you want to do something, you want to make a project, maybe you want to fix something that's broken, or you want to make a birdhouse because, you see that the birds need some food in the winter. You need all of those things that we just talked about as examples to bring your project to life. So I just think there isn't really a reason or a situation where the studio thinking practices that I was talking about would not be at play and be helpful.
Absolutely. You talk about bringing all these things to life, and you mentioned project-based learning. That's one of the big buzzwords in education. There's so many, but project-based learning, that's the way kids are learning in 2021. That's the way they're going to learn in 2025, 2030, and so on and so forth. Those days of me and you when we were in school, where the teacher directed everything and we wrote stuff down on a piece of paper, those days are over. Our students can't learn that way. And so you talk about those hands-on project where kids are thinking outside of the four classroom walls. That's what it is. And it's just, that just means so much that there's people like you, myself, and just so many others all over the world that are really bringing this to life. And, and just in my opinion, we're seeing a real generational shift in educators that are bringing more of that to the table. I got one right beside me who is doing the same thing. We pick each other's brains, and so it's really comforting to see that our newer generations are going to be exposed to this type of learning. So you're also an author, and if you have not already, you need to purchase Pop-Up Studio. This is, like I said, and we talked about this before we went on the air, just how well done this is. The pictures, the descriptions, the easy read, the examples. I mean, this text is going to provide so much. So first of all, where can you find this text? And what was your motivation in writing this text?
Well, thank you so much for the compliment. And I did have it handy, so people could see the cover, and I did actually bookmark a little part of it as well, but you'll be able to take a little sneak peek. It is available on my website, which is popupstudioed.com, and it's free shipping within North America. And if you are outside of North America, you can purchase the book through Follett. You can email me and purchase it through me as well, but I think they might have better shipping deals if you're buying an individual book. I also recently, big news, did a digital version. So I'm trying to find time to get that up on the website as well. But popupstudioed.com is where you'll find all of that. You can download the introduction to the book and a mini guide as well. And so there's lots of different things on that website that you can, get into to get a sense of what Pop-Up Studio is all about and how it can help you in your practice. So you asked me about my motivation for writing the book. Yeah, and that's there's a lot of things that went into it. And Dustin, you and I were talking before we went on air about all of what is needed in terms of getting a book out. And, I think that bravery is really key, but I also think having people ask you for it is what can really help. And that's what happened to me. So it all started in 2016 when our provincial curriculum changed. So I'm in British Columbia, as you mentioned. I'm on the unceded and traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And our curriculum changed to a competency driven, concept based curriculum. And so that meant that inquiry and purposeful play were very much on the table, and teaching with concepts in mind. And not to say that content isn't important and skills aren't important, but they became very clearly the foundation, with the goals being supporting students to develop conceptual understanding, to develop that conditional thinking, to be in the discipline and to live that discipline, to be scientists, be mathematicians, etc. And I was positioned very well because of my background in inquiry, and also my interest in practices that we see in Reggio Emilia as an example. And I'm not an early years practitioner, but there's a lot that's going on in the early years that is very helpful and echoes what we've always known to be true about human learning. So just having collaborators like Janice Nowakowski come into my classroom and show me what she was working on, and then to be fortunate enough to have people ask me to come in and support them. So I would do workshops, and those workshops led to long-term projects. And I found that working with our hands are our highways for learning. And that's true for any age, I have found. And so rather than just talk about how we might do things, I thought it makes so much more sense for us to actually physically do it. So I would set up the learning environment in the guest school or location where I was invited as a pop-up studio. As a pop-up classroom type of thing. And what I found so interesting, Dustin, is the traction was huge. So people would contact me and say, I just did a pop-up studio in my classroom. It was amazing. I feel like I'm the educator I've always wanted to be. And, principals or directors or coordinators who were hiring me were, asking me to come back because the learning was fast-tracked. And what was even more is the educators were saying, this feels therapeutic. This feels so good. I feel better after being with you and my colleagues in this kind of space than I did coming in. And so that was just really exciting. And so people started asking me, these folks started saying, could you write down your approach? And I said, no. There are so many good books. Like, why would I ever do that? Read Kath Murdoch's book, read, Lynn Erickson's book, like read the people whose shoulders I stand upon, and create it yourself, because it's really about your own artistry. And the requests kept coming, Dustin. And so I thought, oh, okay. And Janice, came on board as my thinking partner, and we got that first edition done, and it sold out within a year. And I almost said, you know what? Okay, well, it's done. It's had its time, but I again got many requests, and I thought rather than, just printing more copies of the book, I should address things people wanted, like more examples and a bit more clarity around the coaching conversation. And so I not only did that, I doubled the content and basically rewrote the book, because that's what I do. And now you've got the text that's in your hands, which I'm
Nice.
just so excited about. So in a nutshell, it really came from persistent requests for this work. People want it, and that's so exciting. If I can be helpful, that's why I'm here in the world.
Absolutely. It's funny how life just kind of unfolds. If you were to ask me when I was an undergraduate, did I ever want to teach special ed? Did I want to get my doctorate? Did I want to be an administrator? I would have said, heck no. And here we are. And same thing, I'm in the process of writing a text. You've written a text. I'm sure if you go back in time, could you picture yourself writing a textbook? Maybe, but probably not. And just the fact that people seek you out, that they are seeing something that you're providing and they want that. It's one of my favorite quotes that I was told is, your name is being spoken in rooms you haven't entered yet. So people
Mhm.
know who you are. They know, the good that you're bringing, and they want to be a part of that. And just so much that you're able to create a piece that, can go anywhere. So that's just, it's just, it's really neat how things just kind of come together when they're supposed to.
That's really beautiful. I don't identify as a religious person per se, but I
Hmm.
do subscribe to this concept that we're all connected
Hmm.
and that the universe has your back.
Oh yeah.
And and I think it's been a real opportunity for me to just keep growing in my own depth and my own knowledge and my own skills, that braid, that we talked about. And I'm very much like a dog with a bone, when there's things I can't figure out, I have a cognitive puzzle, or I can see that something has meaning for somebody, it's pulling on the heartstrings. I just get really focused. I get in that state of flow, as Csikszentmihalyi talks about, and I have to be in it. And I think that's being an artist, as well. And I think artists are the ones who um, they reach beyond, right? And they give us vision, and they zing with our hearts, and they push those boundaries. And I think when we can all do that, we're all better together.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we are one team, because all of us were a team. And so, and
Mhm.
this isn't just words. I consider teachers all over the world to be my colleagues, because we're in the same fraternity. We can relate to each other. So if we're in
Mhm.
schools, and thousands of miles away, we're all colleagues, and we all have the same
100%.
students together.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh, I love that, Dustin. Yeah, so true. So true.
since you have written Pop-Up Studio, there's always a lot of growth that occurs, and you're probably still feeling it to this day. So how have you grown as a professional and person since publishing your work and making it, for everyone?
Hmm. And I think this, I can elaborate on what I was just talking about, that, um, I think anytime you're making a piece, you're making art, whether that's your lesson plan, your unit plan, a bulletin board, or a book, whatever, blog post, a podcast, whenever you're doing that, you're inviting an audience in to think with you. And so this book has, in the platform, the process of Pop-Up Studio has done that. And so, for me, it's really given a vehicle to become more knowledgeable, to grow in my wisdom, to grow in my risk taking, to grow in my passion. And I think a big thing with that writing does for us, or any kind of sharing, whether that's an oral story or a written story or performance based story, is we need to articulate. And that process is difficult for me. But because I'm a perfectionist, so I want to get things right and I worry about that. But it just allows us to like refine, all the time. And I think, when we're with people who are really articulate, they're possibility creators for us, because we find things inside of what they say that's like, yes, it validates, or maybe it puzzles us and we want to go into it more. And so that for me has afforded community building, which is really what drives me. I am very community minded. I'm very service oriented. And so the book has afforded me more opportunities to be of service. And that's what I love. And that in turn helps me grow as a human being in the world, because I just want to be a good person and do good work.
Well,
And that's, so I can be a good mom. And I can honor our first mother, which is Mother Earth, so I think it's all just connected, and I'm just very appreciative of having opportunities like the one that we're having now, because it's allowed me to meet you,
yeah,
and allowed me to meet your listeners,
yeah,
and then it's just magical. So
yeah.
yeah.
Absolutely. There really are amazing people out there. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, you don't hear a lot about those, because unfortunately, the other side, you hear that, which is, that's another conversation. But there are
Mhm.
just so many people in so many different fields, not just in education, but in
Mhm.
medical and law, and just where that are doing amazing things. And the fact
Mhm.
that people want to share it. Even as a teacher, I'm like you, I'm a community person. My
Mhm,
job is to help others. That's the
mhm,
way I see
mhm,
myself and the stuff that I do, both as an educator and like we're doing right here. So, the
mhm,
fact that we have these platforms, these opportunities to share and grow
mhm,
and learn and connect and
mhm,
continue to collaborate, it's really, really an awesome thing. So,
mhm,
the last thing I want to ask you, so when you look at the educational setting,
mhm,
how is arts going to continue to grow?
mhm, mhm. I think, this is probably one of my favorite questions. You have fabulous questions, and I really enjoyed doing a little bit of preparation for our time together. And um, what I have all these little books beside me to, do a little shout out. And one of the books that I wanted to bring forward is called Creative Confidence by Tom Kelly and David Kelly. So these are the people who started D School at Stanford, and they write about, obviously, a creative confidence, and they share lots of different examples. And so when I think about, how art will continue to grow in the education setting, I think we are pointed towards a new direction. And I'm actually going to qualify this. I don't think it's a new direction. I think it's the direction that Indigenous people have held and have communicated forever. And that is a direction where we are all connected, and we really do honor all of our relations. And so, with that in mind, I think, well-being, we can see is coming on board as one of the main goals for young people in 2050 when they are in the workforce. We know adaptability is hugely important. We can see that over the pandemic as an example. Connections, our planet and the health of our planet, all of these things require us to be very community minded, I think, and to think like artists, and to be responsive, and to be tuned in to possibilities, and to be sensitive, and to be awake. And so I think art really, and again, not the art, hanging on the museum wall, or, the ceramic vase that's, in your house, although that could be examples. I'm talking kind of about those studio thinking principles that I was referencing earlier. So he gives a really good, or they give a really good example in the book. They talk about, and I wrote his name down, I don't want to get it wrong. I believe it's Doug. I wrote it somewhere, but I can't see it here. Doug, do I have it handy? Yes, Doug Dietz. I don't know if I'm saying it right. It's Dietz. He, as a 24-year veteran of General Electric, when this book was written anyway, and he helped to create the MRI system. Amazing, right? And in the book, he talks about that, he had wrapped up the project, he was really excited about it, and he was invited to a hospital to see the MRI machine, in practice. And they talk about him being there with the technician, and the technician, goes into the hall and has the patient come. And the patient is a young girl, a frail young girl walking with her parent, and she's terrified, and the parents obviously feeling that as well. And so Doug has this opportunity to really resonate on the human level with his technology. And so this opportunity, because Doug is sensitive to design, he recognizes there's an opportunity to make this better. And so it sounds like in the book, he goes through a workshop at D School. And what he does, Dustin, is he ends up transforming the MRI machine through art to like something you would find at an amusement park. And so the kids are going into, maybe it's a pirate ship, or they're taken to this other world. The machine is embodied or encased by fantasy, by game, by pleasure, by, this magical other world. He wouldn't have done that if he wasn't thinking like a designer, if he wasn't thinking as an artist, if he wasn't a change maker. And so I think this is what we're needing today. And Pop-Up Studio is designed to, in response, to nurture our creative intelligence. We know the best practitioners are the ones who, as the New London group talks about, are able to design and redesign their work with learners in the very practice of educating, in the very practice. And so that's what Pop-Up Studio is about, because we're all really busy and it's a luxury to, do what I'm doing and work on a PhD, and not be in the classroom day in, day out, where burnout's really high. It's a luxury to have that reflective time. And we're all wanting to be reflective. We're all wanting to be innovative. But how can we do that in the very act of teaching? How can we use design to respond to our learners? And Pop-Up Studio offers some support in that area. So I really hope that your listeners will check it out and give me feedback. We were talking about the value of that at the start as well. And that's what I'm here to be, is a support and in conversation and in community with all of our colleagues, as you talked about.
Wow. Wow, way to cap that off. That was that was fantastic. So just to go back to, designing an MRI machine, think about the millions of lives that it saved, and just improving the quality of life, for people, and just bringing that imagination, that growth, that, trying something different. It's just very eloquent. So absolutely, get out there, get Pop-Up Studio, contact Misty. I will put her handle on the link to this video. And again, Misty, thank you for your time. We're going to go off the air in a moment. And again, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your time, and thank you to your listeners for their time. Time is our most precious, resource, if we can call it that. And I'm really grateful to spend it with you all.